Good morning, Year 8. So today's lesson, the problem with plastics. So we're learning objectives today: identify uses of plastic, explain why plastic is a useful substance, explain the disadvantage of using plastics. So as per usual, if you see the pen, you're going to copy down that information because it's important. Pencil and ruler is where you're going to draw a diagram or table, and the pause button is where you pause the video and complete the tasks. So identify use of plastics and explain why it's a useful substance. So you can see on the screen there are loads and loads and loads of different uses of plastics. And I'm sure at the moment you've got a pen in your hand and it's going to be made of plastic. If you look around your room now, you've probably got other forms of plastic. If you've got a phone near you, that's going to have plastic on it. If you've got a drinks bottle, that's made of plastic. Cleaned your teeth this morning, you use plastic. And the reason is because plastic can be molded into pretty much any shape that we want it to be. It can be molded into a tiny syringe to deliver drugs, and it can be used to make things like chairs as well. Also, plastic doesn't biodegrade, so it doesn't break down over time. So if you've got food and it's kept in plastic, that food is protected from the external environment. It's kept safe, it's kept protected, it doesn't go off, it's not going to get out of the container, and things aren't going to get into the container either. And it's the same thing with chemicals. A lot of chemicals are kept in plastics. So if I go and pick up a bottle of bleach, I know the bleach isn't going to go on my skin because of that plastic. It's not going to be able to get through that plastic. And plastic's got lots of different properties as well, depending on what we want to use it for. So the chair in the bottom right-hand corner, that is a very strong plastic. That's going to be able to withstand quite a large mass on it, and therefore it's not going to break. But some plastics, we want them to be slightly softer. So some cleaning cloths you have around your house will be made of plastic. The plastic bags in the top right-hand corner, they can change shape. So it's got lots of different properties. And actually plastic itself is quite cheap to make at the moment. It's made of crude oil, which is running out, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But generally, the plastic is quite a low-cost product at the minute, and that's why we use it so much. So just to summarise, plastics can be moulded into many shapes. Different plastics have different uses. They do not biodegrade, so they can protect food and products for a long period of time, and it's a low cost of production at the moment. So what I suggest you do, pause the video, and under the heading Uses of Plastics, just jot down those ideas. Okay, so now we're going to look at the disadvantages of using plastic, so the problem with plastics. Now, plastic's made from crude oil. So crude oil is formed from the remains of dead animals that died millions of years ago and has been compressed under the ground for millions of years, and then we drill down and we get the crude oil. So the crude oil is running out. We use it for petrol as well and fuel and for loads and loads of different things, but we won't go into that now. So essentially, we're not going to have a lot of crude oil left. So it is running out. And in order to get the crude oil, we have to transport it, that which is dangerous. To separate it into a useful substance, we have to heat it to a high temperature. So that's another consequence. So the fact that the plastics come from crude oil is a massive disadvantage. Okay, so another problem with plastics is that they do not biodegrade. They are not biodegradable, which means that they don't break down in like something like food waste would biodegrade. It would break down, it would rot is another word we might use for it. So this plastic bag will be around for hundreds of years because it just doesn't break down. And what it can happen is it can be broken into really small pieces called microplastics, and these get eaten by animals. They clog up the food chain, and they cause loads and loads of problems. So plastics don't biodegrade, which is a massive problem with them. Now, we've already looked at this a little bit in terms of our pollution. So loads of the plastics that go to waste will go to landfill, and huge amounts of it get washed up on beaches. Because it floats, it's low density, it floats, and so it floats in the seas and oceans, washes up on beaches, and causes loads of problems to wildlife. So it causes problems in the ocean, and animals get stuck on the plastics, but also they can ingest it. So we've looked at that. They can eat it, and that causes them harm as well. Okay, so any plastics in the ocean are a real problem. Plastics in landfill. As I've already said, they don't biodegrade. Most plastics go to landfill. So if they're taking up space, we're running out of space, and therefore this is an issue. So we need to think of other ways of disposing of our plastics, but more importantly, not using them in the first place. So reducing our use of plastic. Okay, to summarise, problems with plastics. They're made from crude oil, which is running out. Making plastics causes air pollution, so burning the fossil fuels, so the crude oil, in order to separate it out into its useful substances, as well as transporting it. Plastics are not biodegradable. Plastics in the seas and oceans are killing animals. Burning of them releases toxic chemicals. So can you pause the video and write down these under the title of problems with plastics? So progress check time. So writing down 1 to 6 and then writing down your answers to these questions. So number 1, identify 5 uses of plastics. 2, are plastics biodegradable? 3, what are plastics made from? 4, how are most plastics disposed of? 5, what's the problems with burning plastic? And 6, what is an advantage of using plastic? So pause the video there and write down your answers. So let's review your answers. 5 uses of plastics. You probably could have come up with 100, so I've just come up with 5 that I had on the screen. Chairs, pens, bags, bottles, toothbrushes, but there are loads and loads of different uses of plastics. Are they biodegradable? No, they're not. They don't break down over time. What are plastics made from? Crude oil. How are most plastics disposed of? In landfill. What's the problem with burning plastic? Releases toxic chemicals. And what is the advantage of using plastics? So they can be molded into lots of shapes, they do not biodegrade, and there's a low cost of production. Remember, at the moment. Okay, so we're going to look at an article that is an exam question to think about some of the consequences of using plastic. So supermarkets launch eco-friendly plastic milk bags. Could this be the end of milk bottle? So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to go down to the question so that we know what we're looking out for in this article. So supermarkets claim that using milk bags instead of milk bottles would have less environmental impact. Do you agree with this claim? Use the information in the article and your knowledge and understanding to make appropriate comparisons to justify your answer. So what we need to be able to do is we need to use information in the article and your knowledge in order to make a comparison. So now we know what we're looking for, we can go and read through the article, and I'm going to highlight as I go. So milk bottles are made from glass or from plastic. So glass milk bottles contain 0.5 litres of milk, so half a litre of milk. When the milk is used, the empty bottles are returned to be reused. Glass milk bottles are reused 24 times on average. The glass to make new milk bottles is produced when a mixture of sand, limestone, soda and recycled glass is heated to about 1600 degrees in a furnace, so in a big fire. There's almost unlimited amounts of raw material needed to produce the glass. So we're not running out of any of these things. And about 35% of used glass is recycled. Most common plastic milk bottle contains 2 litres of milk. When the milk is used up, the empty bottles are discarded as waste, so they go to landfill. The plastic used to make these milk bottles is polythene. Polyethylene is from crude oil, and it's separated by a process of fractional distillation, then cracking, and finally polymerization, but we don't need to worry about that. About 5% of used polythene is recycled, so this is generally all used polythene. The new plastic bags contain 2 litres of milk, so same as the bottles. The milk bags are also made from polyethylene. A milk bag uses 75% less polyethylene than it would be to make milk bottles. When the milk is used up, the empty bags are discarded as waste. So, do we think it's better to use milk bags or milk bottles? Okay, so what we need to look at here, we're going to say, so let's start off with saying the glass milk bottles hold less milk. Okay, so we're going to say 0.5 litres compared to 2 litres. Okay, so already it's better to use the bags than the milk, because the bottles, because they can actually hold onto more milk. Okay, so glass is made from materials that are not limited. Okay, but the plastic is made from crude oil, which we know is limited. It's running out. There's not going to be lots of it around forever. And then the final point I'm going to compare is that the glass can be reused 24 times and the plastic is discarded, so disposed of, thrown away, as waste to landfill. Okay, so I disagree that actually the bags are better than the bottles. So I'm just going to finally say that I disagree with the claim. Alright, so now you're going to have a look at some questions of your own, and then I'll go through them with you as well. Okay, so it's deliberate practice time. So I've gone through an exam question with you. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video here and answer these questions. And then pause the video here and answer these questions. Then you can watch the video to review your answers. Okay, so I'm going to review the exam questions with you. So crude oil is used to make useful substances such as plastics. Read the article about plastics, then answer the questions below. It's a very short article. Problems with plastic waste. Millions of tons of plastics are made from crude oil every year. Most of the litter found on beaches is plastic waste. 80% of plastics produced end up in landfill sites. Draw a ring around the correct answer in the box to complete the sentence. Plastic waste needs to be removed from beaches because it is not biodegradable, so it's not going to break down, which means it's going to be there for a really long time. Suggest a problem caused by 80% of plastics going to landfill sites. So we're running out of space. We can't just keep putting more and more rubbish in landfill. Suggest one way of reducing the amount of plastics going to landfill sites. So we could recycle. We can reduce our use, and we can reuse as well. So we could reuse some of the plastics that we've got in the first place. So supermarkets in the UK have been advised by the government to stop giving plastic bags to customers. The government states that this is because plastic bags use up resources that are not renewable, and the manufacture of plastic bags produces carbon dioxide. Most of these plastic bags are made from polyethylene or polythene. The table below shows methods to deal with large numbers of used plastic bags. So we've got 4 methods and what happens to the plastic bag. So reused, used again by the customer, recycled, collected, transported, washed and melted to make new plastic items, burned, collected, transported and burnt to release heat energy, and dumped, mixed with household waste, collected, transported and disposed of in a landfill site. Use the information and your knowledge and understanding to briefly give one advantage and one disadvantage for each of these methods. So let's look at reused. Okay, so we're going to save raw material. It's the one I'm going to go for, but you can have it saves energy. We're going to have fewer bags. It's going to reduce carbon, reduce use of landfill, but then there's going to be no there's going to be no waste, so we're going to have less requirement to have our bags being reused. Recycled, so if we're recycling it, okay, so recycling it is going to be saving raw materials again. Going to save raw materials and reduce landfill. Okay, however, we need to heat it to a high temperature. So that's going to be our disadvantage. I will come back to the disadvantage of reused in a moment. So burned, so it's going to release energy, and this can actually be used in homes. We're going to reduce landfill, but obviously it's also going to release toxic chemicals as it burns. Okay, so dumped, if it's going to be dumped, the advantage of this, okay, is going to be that it's removed from homes. So as the user, you don't have to worry about it, you just put it in the bin, but obviously it's going to take up space in landfill. Also, what it's going to be doing is it doesn't biodegrade. Okay, so if we think about reuse, now in here, used again by the customer, doesn't really give us a disadvantage. So actually, this one we're going to have to use our knowledge of reusing. So when we looked at plastics, we thought about the advantage of it is that they last a long period of time, but a lot of these plastics are meant to be used over and over again. So not all can be used. And you might think of some of the packaging, some of your food comes in, like a crisp packet. You can't use that again, it has to be thrown away. So not all plastics can be reused.